Hey, happy fall, y'all. It's Kimberly and Tim Scott at Hope Rescue Podcast. And I say that because we're not officially in fall, but in this household, it is fall.
It is fall.
In fact, interestingly enough,
It is not fall.
we were having a little bit of weather here in San Diego. We had some sprinkling and some wind this morning, which was so exciting. And I personally believe the reason why that happened, because we've been praying for rain and for the change of seasons, and anybody knows me knows that fall is my favorite season. The reason why it happened is I put out the pumpkin mugs this week.
If you put out the pumpkin mugs,
it will come.
It will come. It will show up.
Now, I haven't actually bought a pumpkin yet, but there are fall leaves and arrangements, so I invited the presence of fall into our home, Tim.
Okay, so last week we got a rain, which was great.
Right?
That was awesome.
Yep. We needed it.
Yeah, and it's kind of nice to see that. I had just watered the lawn thoroughly, so that helped. A little rain on top of my sprinklers. Oh, well, whatever.
So, and I'm not going to lie, this week we have made pumpkin scones. We have made cranberry orange scones. We have all the pumpkin. And I have all the pumpkin. You guys just indulge me here, but we have like 3 types of syrup for our coffee for fall. It's
what?
3 types of syrup.
That's right.
Pumpkin syrup, caramel.
I don't do that.
And let's see, what else did we get? We got like a fresh vanilla one. Anyway, it's good.
It is. I do like how you make it nice and
it's
cozy.
cozy.
Yeah, that's the word. I probably never
So
said
cozy.
cozy till I met you, but I say it all the time now. And because we had little kids again, I started saying potty, but that's another story.
And he
That's
still
another
does.
podcast for another day.
He says to me, "Mother, I need to go potty."
Yeah, I do not say that, but I think it.
Someday, maybe. Another 15 years.
Well, listen, we're going to be talking about social personalities, and you're going to give us an intro to that. But this whole idea of what is your personality? How do you relate to people on a social level?
Right.
There's many ways to look at personalities. You know, there's temperaments.
Yeah.
There's Enneagram.
Enneagrams. There's, I mean, it depends
Breyers.
too. Like if you go through, Breyers, Riggs, is it?
Now we got it backwards, but close enough.
Myers-Briggs.
Myers-Briggs. There
That's
it is.
dyslexia right there.
I got it.
That's a personality
This is a
issue.
podcast on dyslexia, which we both have
So
a little bit of.
Yeah, so I grew up in a study on temperaments when I was younger, and
Yeah,
that's
me too.
the whole actually the core of that comes from the Freudian, study of the biles of the stomach.
Actually, it comes before that. I'm just going to
Really?
correct you there. It comes all the way back to China.
Oh,
Yes,
interesting.
it does. But it
okay,
has
well,
to
that's
do
another
with body
podcast.
fluids.
But
Yeah,
there's so many different
but we're not
versions.
going
We're,
there.
we're going to keep it simple today.
We're going to keep it super simple because we are simple people. And we're going to talk about the difference between, in the next 3 weeks, we're going to talk about the difference between extroverts, introverts, and ambiverts,
Right.
not necessarily in that order.
Yeah.
So we shared this before. The first guy to bring this up was a guy named Carl Jung, who is I think he's Swedish.
Oh.
Yeah, Swedish psychiatrist, psychologist. Anyway, I believe he lived till 85 years old. He died in 1961. I see no one taking notes. But anyway,
My eyes are rolling back in my head
It's just fresh
right
in my mind because I just looked that up. But, he came up with some great stuff. One of the things he did was he talked about introverts, extroverts.
Right.
Ambivert came in kind of later on. But it's not even close to what we think of today.
Yeah.
Extroverts. So we're not going with the classic Dr. Jung. We're really going to talk about those 3 and how they're used today in psychology, but how we can relate to them through a biblical grid as well.
Yeah, which is
grid.
important. And obviously, it's way more complex than we can actually delve into. But I think it'll be really interesting for you, whether you are married, single, have family, children, to help better understand. I know for me, what it did was, especially with relationships, close friends, when you understand them through this simple grid of their social personality type, you understand that they're not doing things to you. It's actually who they are. Yeah. And so you get a better understanding, you get better tools to know how to negotiate their personality type, to be able to communicate better, et cetera, et cetera. So the 3 simple basics are: number 1, introvert; Number 2 would be extrovert. The number 1, the introvert, is energized by having alone time.
And here's the key, by the way, before you finish those.
Yeah.
Here's the key to understanding these social personalities. It has to do with the way that you are fueled and energized.
Right.
Like, how do you refuel?
Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
There are people that refuel in one way versus another way. So kind of do it in that context.
Yeah, so if you're an introvert, ask yourself, am I energized by being alone? That would be probably point you to being an introvert. Yeah. If you are energized by social time, social connection, most likely you lean towards being an extrovert.
Like parties and stuff. How do you feel when you go to a party?
Right.
Are you energized, or are you like me, standing in the corner watching it happen?
Sipping
I'm an observer at a party.
Sipping your soda in the corner.
Wait, unless I am the party.
I was going to say,
Mr.
this for people who know you, this is shocking for you to even say that, because they know you solely through the context of you being a leader in the church world on the pulpit, and you're dynamic and charismatic. So that doesn't make sense to them, but we'll explain.
Yeah, and one of the things we're going to talk about this too is, because we're going to talk about Moses, but there are people that I know that pastor mega churches and are dynamic public speakers who are introverts.
Introverts, yeah.
Yeah.
I would say that's you.
So what was the third one?
And the third one is an ambivert, and this gets a little more complex, but they are energized by purpose. So it may appear that they are introverted perhaps and extroverted, but when in reality they're looking for meaning in social interactions. So if there is purpose behind them being socially active and networking, quote unquote, or connecting with people, they are, you would think, extroverts. But truly they're motivated by the purpose behind that, whether it's business, whether it's spiritual, so that fuels them. And then they go back and retreat into introversion to be able to refuel to do that again.
Yeah. Here's something to keep in mind. Since the Industrial Revolution, especially when it hit America, Americans really got tied into this. And then when it kind of reached its peak in the turn of the 20th century, with the great industrialists like, J. Paul Getty and, all the other guys that developed railroad, steel, lights, all of that stuff, and the car and mass production of the car. So all of this takes place kind of in the 1890s through 1910, 15, 20. You have this whole movement from an agrarian society to an industrialized society. And what happens with that is people move from farms and ranches, and they move to the cities. So what that's created is a very, what I will call just simply a noisy world.
Yes.
And we live in a noisy world.
We do.
And the way we negotiate that, I think, is different than things used to be, back in agrarian society, where agriculture was the primary product. Today, it's information, technology. We've even moved away from industries that were big. We've shipped them overseas. But nevertheless, we live in a noisy world, and we've got to find balance and comfort in that world. Yeah. The way that you find balance and comfort is to connect with yourself, reconnect with your energy and what fuels you, what really fuels you to move through. Now, here's one of the things we want to make sure. Labeling somebody who's an introvert, because we're going to lead out with introversion today. Somebody that's an introvert, if we use this label of antisocial, what we've done is we've moralized their social personality.
It's a mistake.
As if that's something wrong. It's not wrong to be introverted. It's not wrong or right to be extroverted. It's not wrong or right to be ambiverted. The reality is that, in fact, our behavior is due to this, how we fuel and how we see ourselves in society. And I think we misunderstand personalities in that way.
Can I speak to that real quick? I think that what a heartbreak it would be if people believed that truly and lived that out, because it would rob the world of all of the beautiful texture and personality types if we tried to make everybody an extrovert. I mean, for me, as I lean more towards extroversion, although we'll talk about this another time, but later in life, I think I've found more of a balance due to some unique challenges. But I feel like, some of the wisest people I know that I've leaned into for close relationships have not been extroverts. Yeah. They have been the introverts who have used that time to fuel themselves, obviously, but they tend to have deeper wells of wisdom because they love alone time. There's a lot of introspection and study that they do. They have a deeper understanding of obviously any topic, but and I just feel like, gosh, I'm so grateful. Even within our family, we have that dynamic with our children and their spouses. You see it happen often with spouses where an extrovert will marry an introvert, and that's because we're searching for that balance, in relationships, and it parallels as well in friendships.
Yeah, and I do think that changes. When I say changes, I think it modifies. I don't think you can change your basic social personality.
Yeah,
and if you're trying to change your spouse, who maybe is an extrovert, and you try to turn them into an introvert, you're going to do damage to your relationship. Right. So you got to keep that in mind. But one of the scriptures that comes up is this scripture in Hebrews 10:25, and we'll have Kimberly read that in just a minute. But think about this verse when we talk about social personalities, and think about how this may create guilt.
Yeah, it says, not neglecting to meet together, as in the habit of some, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day drawing near.
Okay, so a lot of people see a church as a big spiritual party.
Right.
And there's a sense in which that's real, like especially a worship service. It's not interactive, it's not community building and so forth. But it stirs us to worship the Lord in that large, connection of a congregation. But when you meet in small groups, you are not neglecting the meeting together. I think some people have applied Hebrews 10:25 to the big event of a worship service, when in reality, it is any connection. It could be you and one other person.
Right.
So the reason I bring that up is, and the reason we bring that up is because we want you to understand there is no reason you should feel badly about not being as comfortable in a large event as, say, somebody else who's more extroverted. So if you're an introvert, there is no shame in being introverted. Introverts need community just as well as extroverts, and they need connection, but they find it differently. So an extrovert might find community and process almost everything in community, but an introvert will probably try to process privately and then connect in community with the process they've been through.
Right. So. And I think it's important to remind everybody that our base natures come from a creative God and by design.
Yeah.
Now, we can experience things as children that can shape that and mold that in positive and negative ways, but to be an introvert or extrovert or whatever, that's by design in its core. Like that is created and by design in the Lord. And so I think it's important to celebrate that. Celebrate that in your children. You can have one that's the party, the queen of the party or whatever, and then one that's shy in the corner. Celebrate exactly who they are from the time they're young.
So there's a few ways in which a introvert will find community. It's different than an extrovert. We kind of see the extroverts because it's real obvious. But why don't we list out some of those things?
Yeah. So some of the ways introverts would find community is, well, first of all, introverts don't like to be excluded. So let's just put that out there.
Nobody likes to be excluded.
And so they, that's one of the caveats is you think because they're quiet, well, they won't want to engage. That's not true. They want to be invited. They want to be included to public events and events, and they'll find their own way around coping around that,
Yeah. And I don't think you want to be invisible.
Exactly.
Now, enjoy when I go to a party. Parties are a little bit uncomfortable for me.
Yeah.
It seems trivial and so forth. I enjoy watching people having fun. A lot of times that's not fun for me for whatever reason. But I don't want to be left alone.
Right.
And so if I can connect with one person,
I've seen you do it over and over again.
2 or 3 people, I will sit over in a corner and talk to one person.
Yeah.
And if things are not going well with adults, I'll just do it with a child.
Hang with the
I'll
kids.
sit with the kids because they understand me. They do.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that was the first thing. Introverts don't like to be excluded. What else?
And they do like community, but it takes more energy for them to connect. So again, they want to be involved, but it does require more of them to be connected in a party, a dinner, for example. We have in our immediate family and with significant others, we have several that are introverts, and we have such a large family that gathers just about every week or every other week, and so it becomes real obvious, that there's the bigger personalities can dominate. But what I love about these few that are that way is that they know that like they can hang in there, and then if they get a chance to say something, it's worth listening to. But thank God for the balance in that. But it does take them more energy to connect. And one of them in particular has said, after a long weekend of family events, they have to just, refuel and retreat because it becomes its own, machine, train.
Right. It becomes, you kind of go to overload. If you're an introvert,
a tilt.
Don't feel badly if you go to overload.
Right. Yeah. So introverts know how to socialize. They're just simply energized by alone time. So it's not that most of them know completely how to connect and reach out with others and communicate with others. It's just that they are energized just by having that time alone to be able to do that. And then many introverts want a small community, but they still desire community. So they feel like a better fit in a small one, in a small community. So a small group is perfect, like what you were describing before.
They can, and small groups can be threatening to introverts, but once you're comfortable, you're pretty good.
Yeah.
You would think, I grew up in a family of 6 kids, and we had 7. And, with all of that, you would think that I am most comfortable around large groups.
Yeah.
But actually, I'm more comfortable. Like I'll just talk to Ronnie over on the side, or Jesse, or or maybe
nights,
2 of them, or And if for whatever reason that's just the comfort zone, that's the way God made me, and I don't feel badly about it.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, kind of moving on. We were thinking about maybe some people in the Bible that may be introverts and extroverts. Now, it's a little bit of a stretch to take modern psychology and throw it on to New Testament and Old Testament characters. But, excuse me, it may help us to kind of understand the way we think too. Like the question came to me, was Paul an introvert? And you think, well, he's an extrovert. Look at all of his writings. Well, introverts are writers. A lot of writers are introverts.
Journals.
In fact, it takes someone who's somewhat introverted to be able to sit down and do the scholarship of researching and writing based on that research. It's extroverts probably don't want to do that. Introverts are people that do great in gardens.
Yes.
Extroverts want to go walk through the garden or something. I don't know.
Yeah. Although I think it is true though, and introverts, I feel like they tend to lean more towards being readers, like you said, researchers, and extroverts. And I lean more to the extrovert. I am drawn to learning by people telling stories and visuals. So things I can learn online that are visual and interactive with your hands, 3-dimensional. So that again involves other people. So it's just different styles of learning, and there's value to both.
Well, Paul, we asked that question: is Paul an introvert or an extrovert? 2 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 10, it says this: "For they say his letters are weighty and strong, but his bodily presence is weak." So when he's with us, the Corinthians were actually attacking Paul's leadership. And they're like, you don't even make sense when you're here. You're not even that powerful when you're present with us. but your letters are strong and weighty. Well, an introvert might do that, but I don't know that that has to do with introversion or extroversion. I think it has to do with the fact that when Paul writes, he is writing as the Word of God. He is being inspired. So God is inspiring that word, and that makes a difference. We also asked the question, what about Moses?
Right.
Moses, for the sake of time, because we're going to run out of time, just simply Moses said, what did he say? He said, I don't want to
be a public speaker.
Yeah, I don't want to be a public speaker. Well, just because you're not a public speaker, that doesn't really say anything about your social personality. Let's be honest. Number one fear for most people is public speaking.
Yes.
For whatever reason, I started young. I am more introverted. I have some friends who are dynamic public speakers who are introverted, and it's amazing. They get up in the pulpit or they get up and do a speech or a talk, and you're like, oh my gosh, they're so dynamic. They must be an extrovert.
Right, loaded with truth and
So the point being, that gift, that ability, that talent to communicate publicly really has very little to do with your social personality. But I want to make sure that we got to this, is talk about character traits that are not social personality specific. So when you think of character traits and social personalities, we'd go, well, introverts are not as sympathetic. Okay, really? That's a character trait. We just wrote down a list of character traits, and I'm just going to read that list off and think about the fact that these don't relate to personalities.
It sounds like the fruit of the spirit kind of list to me.
Well, they kind of are.
Very similar.
Some are and some aren't. Sympathetic, hospitable, kind, friendly, humble, gentle, patient, tolerant. We could say love, joy, peace, long-suffering. Those are the fruit of the Spirit. But those are character traits. And the closer we walk in the Spirit, the more we're going to reflect those. The difference between personality, social personalities, is an extrovert is going to show that more demonstratively, and an introvert is going to show it probably less demonstratively, but in a smaller group as well.
Right.
So
both with equal intentional, and follow through, but each has their own lane of how they go about that.
Yeah, and that
is valuable.
Speak to that. That whole thing of staying in your
lane. So I think that's what's important is whatever you are, we tend to want to be the other because we feel like somehow that there's a deficit because we don't have that trait. So as an extrovert, I lean into friendships that are introverts because I recognize I love the balance in that, and that their ability to, the wisdom usually that comes, the quiet peace that they have, the perspective on life. And I think of it in terms of balance. And so it would be a mistake for me, however, because I based on what my folks have said, I came out kind of the bigger personality of the three kids in my family. And so that's just how God wired me, and it would be a mistake for me to want to pursue being that. I remember one of the most valuable things my mom ever told me, because she is an introvert by nature. And I was telling her, I just want to be you when I grow up, and she looked at me and she said, oh, honey, she said, don't rob the kingdom of God of whom he's created you to be, because you will do things that I could never do. You'll reach people I could never reach because of your personality type. And we all need to rest in that.
Yeah. And if you're an introvert, use that time, not just, it'd be easy for an introvert just to be involved in passive entertainment. You can be an introvert and, just looking at social media, swiping up and just, looking at everybody else's life. You could do that, or you can watch a lot of TV and movies, or read a book, read novels. Use your introversion strength to develop ideas. Spend time in real strong development of biblical truth and understanding how people work. And then when you come together in a team, which we'll talk about next time, we'll talk about how extroverts like to work in teams. But it's really important to keep that in mind. So
yeah, and I was just going to say, in that the same strain of thought is that what's most important here is that we find a way to give the gifts God gave us away. Yeah. Whether you're an introvert or extrovert. So as an introvert, lean into how can I give this gift away to 1, 2, 3 or more, but just that's the goal.
Yeah, we'll conclude with this, but 3 important points that we want to make. Number 1, you cannot fundamentally change your social personality. An extrovert is not going to become an introvert. An introvert is not going to become an extrovert. However, you can modify it. So you can, and I believe you've modified.
I have.
And I probably have modified a little bit, maybe not as much as you have, but I think the reality is you can modify, but you can't fundamentally change who you are. And this is the next one is really, really important. What is that?
Not to feel guilty about how God made you.
It is. It would be a mistake to go, well, I'm just an introvert. Why would you think that?
Or I'm just an extrovert.
Or I'm just an extrovert.
Yeah.
I think a lot of times extroverts get more attention because they're bigger than life. They come into a room, oftentimes you hear them before they get there.
Right.
It's kind of like, and what Paul said about the gifts, spiritual gifts, the gifts that seem more demonstrative, we give less honor. And the ones like the gift of helps that are behind the scenes,
good point.
we give more honor. Kimberly and I learned years ago, when we go around, we were at another church a couple of weeks ago speaking. This very large church, and these people, they've got what they call a dream team. It's just incredible, the machine and how well it runs.
Volunteer team.
But we just walk around, and I went up to the tech guys, thanked them for what they do, the people that are out front. Every service we were signing books, and so they had people that were selling these books and so forth, and I went over and thanked them. What you guys do is great. And everywhere I went where people were volunteering, those are the people we give more honor, Paul said. The guy that gets the honor is the guy that sings, or the gal that sings, or the man or woman who preaches. And really, I think introverts are maybe underestimated.
Oh, for sure.
And then the third thing is you should communicate clearly about your social personality. And this is very important, especially with your spouse. Your spouse will say, well, why can't we go do this? Well, you know what? Maybe they don't like that kind of a party. So what you have to do is negotiate. You have to give and take. Sometimes you go to a party, and sometimes you have, you go to a movie.
Right.
Big difference for an introvert and extrovert. The extroverts were miserable during COVID, and the introverts were just
living their best life.
Yeah. And, let's be honest, our third daughter showed up during COVID and stayed here with us. And, this is before she got married, but she stayed with us and made our life joy.
Gosh,
we were
so
just glad
fun.
to be at home. But anyway, there's some things about an introvert. Now, next time we're going to talk about extroverts. And in a couple of weeks, we're going to talk about what it means to be an ambivert. Listen to these things, kind of think through these and see where you fit, and thank God for who you are.
Amen.
We'll see you next week on Hope Rescue Podcast.
Bye, guys.